Buenos dias, guten tag, buongiorno, true untrue, and most importantly today of all days, happy Mother's Day. My name is Chris Pavone, and alongside my number one this week, Josh Pritchett, on behalf of movers and shakers, we are rediscovering the Federation. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning, Chris, and happy Mother's Day to everybody out there in the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants.
Josh,
So,
I
we
think
had a pretty big episode this week. A lot of revelations were going on.
after
Um,
after the spiritual filler episode that we had last week, I thought this was an intense, charged, and well-paced episode.
Indeed, it was a lot of action, a lot of story building went on in this one, and we got to learn a lot more about Commander Rayner's background.
And we got to learn more about um, uh, the Breen. We learned about more about an Eriga, and most importantly, we learned that Commander Reno padded her resume
Yes, she did massively. So,
massively. So
shall we get into it, my friend?
let's get into it. So the episode is named is Eriga, and it starts off right where we left off last week. That um, Discovery has been advised that the Lochner has captured Maul and Locke, and that they should go immediately um, to get the prisoners from them. And we are met with the grateful return of Commander Nord. And so they are in bad, Locke is in bad shape. And so they are beamed directly to sick bay. And we discover who is trying to get in and talk to them. But of course, Book. But unlike everyone else on Discovery, they're like, oh, yeah, Book, just come on by. Yeah, sure. Commander Non is there, and Commander Non calls him out. And when Book says this is personal, C says, "Oh well, I remember the last time I heard something was personal about you, that you fired photon torpedoes on this very ship and detonated an isolated weapon." Um, and so these are facts that he cannot refute. And when Burnham says, "But he's been a really big help," Non just sort of dismisses him with a like, "If we need help when we're debriefing with them, we'll call you, but don't call us." And so, yeah, Locke is in very bad shape. I mean, he needs a doctor big time. And over the last 800 years, the Federation really hasn't been able to discover a lot about Breen physiology, except there's some vague notes in the Dominion War about how they can regenerate within a cold. And so, out of some deep space locker, they are finding a refrigeration unit they can use to create an environment around Locke that it'll be freezing, and so hopefully that will help in him um, regenerating from his wounds, which they really need him to do because just as they get back to Federation headquarters, they get the order like, no, do not under any circumstance bring him here. And that's when Admiral Vance beams aboard the ship and says, listen, there's a humongous Breen carrier coming our way, and like you've got to take him and you got to run. And clearly he's scared, and he says, we've called back like some ships, but they may not get him in time. And so Burnham convinces him that, listen, you know this is 800 years in the future, advanced sensors, they will discover a way to track us, and it will never end. Like, we got to talk to them right now. So Vance says, okay, yeah, you're right. And the president of the Federation is off world doing some negotiation, and so it's up to Tarina, excuse me, to lead the efforts of what we're going to do. And so there's sort of a summit between Tarina and Burnham brings Rayner, and Vance is there, and so they're all talking about like, what are we going to do here, because they're coming. And Burnham is trying to make the point like, listen, there's something else happening here, because that's a big risk for them to bring a ship into Federation space. Like, what is going on? But Rayner's having none of this, and Rayner's like, listen, the word diplomacy does not exist in their language. Like, we got to strike first while we still can. And he is clearly riled up about the Breen being there. But at the same time, we have the notion that, hey, he has dealt with the Breen before, so he may have some knowledge that we do not have and desperately need. And so, sure enough, the Primarch shows up in a massive ship, and it is a huge ship. It's like an aircraft carrier of ships. And more alarming is when Burnham sees that, she asks Zora, like, Zora, is that the ship that I saw in the timeline 30 years from now that destroyed headquarters. And she's like, yes. So it's like, oh boy. Meanwhile, Damage catches Tilly. Tilly's trying to leave to go back to Federation HQ because all non-essential personnel are being evacuated. And she says, listen, I got to go watch after my cadets. And he's like, no, wait a minute. I need you here with this Bajoran metal piece. We got to figure out what it's about. And like, your cadets are important, but this is much more important right here. And so Tilly grudgingly admits to this. And so she stays on board to help Adira figure out what this next clue is. And then the Primat beams aboard Federation HQ with his entourage. And Joss?
Okay, so the Primarch beams aboard Federation headquarters after President Terrell has tried to secure about 1 hour so that Michael and Vance can figure out what the deal with Maul and Locke is, why this is such a big deal. And Burnham does some really good interrogating, and even though Locke and Maul don't give up the goods, she figures out that, yeah, the whole deal is it's about Locke, that Locke is somebody very high up in Breen royalty, and they need him in order to... Whoever's got him has got control of the throne, in other words. So they need him, and they need him to stay alive at this point. So Burnham is trying to figure out how to use it to her advantage. So she goes to talk to Vance. Now, not Vance, I'm sorry, Raynor. And the deal is, Raynor's home planet was occupied by one of these Breen factions. Apparently, there are 6 major factions. They have all been fighting for, since the burn over who gets to be the new emperor and rule the Breen Empire. Well, Raynor's world was ruled by a different faction than the one that is heading towards Federation headquarters. And he details how this Breen had murdered his whole family. He was the last of his family to survive. All these other things, how their planet was just, their ecology was destroyed and everything by the Breen. So Burnham gets an idea, and she runs it past the Federation with Terrell and Vance. And so when the Breen shows up, Burnham announces that they are going... Well, I want to add this. At first, the leader of the Breen will not speak in Federation Standard, and so he's having a translator speak for him. And he says that the translator says the Primar will not speak to lessers, and President Terrell says, no, I believe a much more accurate interpretation was, I will not speak to spineless grub worms. Let us begin. Let us talk. And so the Primar decides to speak in English, and Burnham pulls this stunt where she says, well, we've been in negotiations with this other Primar, and it's the same Primar that was running Raynor's home planet. And the Primar doesn't want to believe her, but Raynor steps in, and he adds all this specific information about the rival that he would know because he fought against her to save his home world. And so the Primar is starting to agree to back down, but unfortunately, Locke and Maul cannot seem to help themselves, okay, that they're so determined to escape. They hatch a very dangerous plan. So Locke is going to damage the freezer unit that's regenerating him and cause it to give him an overdose, while Maul gets free and heads to the shuttle bay to steal a shuttle and beam them both off the ship so that they can escape. But meanwhile, Burnham has gotten the Breen Primar to agree to back down, that Locke and Maul will stay in their custody for the duration, and that this could work out because then nobody gets him. Okay, so the Primar is willing to go along with this idea, um, but unfortunately, Locke's plan backfires, and he's given himself too much of a dose, and Maul is also quickly recaptured. So now Locke is dying, so they have to go get a Breen doctor to come to the enter to come to Discovery and save him, which unfortunately is too far gone. And he says a tearful goodbye to Maul, and the Breen are ready to go to war with the Federation over this. This is shades of the first episode of Discovery, all the way back many years ago now. But Maul announces that she and Locke were married, and that the Breen have to take her with them because he's her wife. She was his wife, and apparently there was some sort of matching tattoo on her skin. Um, the Primar says, "You would not be welcome amongst us. You are not Breen." Then Maul points out that she can help them get this advanced technology that they were looking for if they agree to take her with them, and that um, it'll give them an advantage over the Federation. So the Breen agree to this, and Michael and President Talar and Admiral Vance and Rayner and Book all talk about this and say, well, she honestly doesn't have that much information anymore. We think we got everything off her ship. So, okay, whatever. So Terrell comes up with, basically says, look, the whole problem is sending her back costs us less than if we keep her. So Book is not happy about this, and he storms off. Meanwhile, Tilly, Adira, and Tig Navarro have figured out what the deal is with the piece of metal, and that it is in the book they are looking for is in a place called the gallery, the archive, which apparently is a traveling library that has been moving through the galaxy for centuries. And they have determined that it is in the Badlands. For those of you who are fans of Deep Space Nine and Voyager, yes, we're talking about the same Badlands from those shows, where the Maquis hid out, and then, of course, it ran along the Cardassian Federation border. So Discovery is heading there to go find the final clue that they hope will lead them to the progenitors technology, and basically they are now in a race with the Breen, so they've got to go. So, okay, Chris. So, did I miss anything?
I think that about wraps it up.
Yes. So, I guess we will now move into the next phase of our show today: the good, the bad, and the Gorn.
There was a lot of good in this episode. I
Yes.
mean, a lot of good. It was well paced. I thought there's definitely some political intrigue. We had a death. I mean, you rarely see a death, and yes, maybe it may not stick, but we had a death. But let me start going down the list of things that I really liked about the episode. I'll start us off with Tarina has shown a spine of steel. Faced with an adversary which they knew little about, except that there was a big, gigantic ship parked at their doorstep, she basically bluffed them. And not only that, but she speaks Breen. I mean, that was so awesome that, they say something and she's like, no, I think what you really mean is this. And also just the political savvy of when she says, well, we need paperwork that needs to be filled out because every civilization has a bureaucracy and every bureaucracy loves their paperwork. So of course they're going to buy that. And when they asked her, like, why did you do that? She said, well, it was better than claiming a tribble infestation. I mean, this was a great episode for Tarina. And the other thing that I liked about this episode was that, as you mentioned, Locke and Maul, up until now, has sort of been played as some star-crossed lovers, that they're not supposed to be together. Like one is like a Breen, the other is one, well, not quite sure what Maul is. But this time, the relationship has real-world consequences. Like Maul is a direct heir to the throne, and his death would have devastating consequences for the Federation. And when it does happen, they have to make a political choice, which clearly is not the right choice, but it's a political choice. And that's what I loved about this episode, because in this episode, they have to do some non-Federation type things. I mean, you have the Federation as having a standard, but there's also the real world right now. And so they have to, fill in for the real world. So I really like that as well. And I'm a huge fan of Commander Narn. So I was glad to see her there. And not only there, but calling Book out and like, yeah, no, I mean, you did this. I mean, let's not forget about like some of the things that you've done. Like, you're still a security risk. So like, you're not getting into this room. And yeah, the nods to Deep Space Nine, like they're going back to the Badlands. The Minion War refrigeration unit, when we all thought the Breen lived in a place that was like really cold. And the backstory that we got about Kellerman and Rayner, that so helps describe why he feels that way about the Breen and why he feels that way about anyone, quite frankly. So we finally engaged in some world building, not only about we got mentions of two Primarchs, we got mentions of like what happened in Kelleroom, sort of like what's going on with the Breen. But the backstory of Rayner, yeah, there was some world building that we have not seen in this one. And I got a couple other things, but Josh, what did you like about the episode?
Well, I liked all the parts with Rayner. That was probably my favorite part. I liked the fact that Tig Navarro played a significant part of the show. In fact, she had one great line where she talked about when she was a smuggler of rare antiquities, and she said I'm not going to try to say what she said, but she said, say that 3 times fast. And I'm wondering if she was breaking character, and they just left that in the scene. That was really fun. I had really enjoyed, I like you. I agree that the political intrigue was the thing. I thought it was a really great twist that Locke and Maul, in fact, were not just boyfriend girlfriend; they were married. I was a little bit surprised, though, that Maul didn't try to say something to the Breen like, "Well, no, wait, Locke is no longer the heir to the throne. I'm carrying the heir to the throne. I'm pregnant." So, which would have been interesting. I mean, obviously, okay, yeah, this child will be half bringing half something else, but that doesn't matter because that may not matter because it's like, yeah, it's still the heir to the throne that we needed. As far as other things go that I really liked, I did like seeing more of the Federation starships. That was pretty cool. And I don't know. There was I liked how Adira's character is evolving, especially she has a great rapport with Tilly. I am hoping that Adira and Rayner will be characters that'll get carried over into Academy if we can get that done. I want to address that later, but I think there was a lot. I think that they definitely, and I am intrigued about this whole idea of a traveling library throughout the galaxy. Okay, that sounds really cool and mysterious, like something out of classic Trek. So I am very curious to see what that's all about next week.
One of the reasons, Josh, I thought this episode worked more so than the others, especially more than last week's, is because instead of being Burnham all the time, this one relied on the other members of the ensemble. I mean, everyone got a piece of the storyline, and while Burnham was sort of helping drive it, but she's not omnipresent throughout the episode like she was in the previous one about the whistleblower speak. Mm-hmm. I mean, you had moments with Janet Reno where we find out that she has padded her resume. You had moments with Stamets, you had moments with Commander Narn, you had moments with Vance, you had moments with President Tarina. My point being is I think the show works much better when Michael Burnham is not in every scene. And this is something that I think has been a weakness of this last season, where it's a lot of Burnham and not a lot of the other members of the ensemble. And I think this works much better when other members of the ensemble are there to help carry the load. Um, and I'll speak about this a bit more in the bad, but the reason why I thought, again, this episode was so well done and so well paced and just worked is because instead of relying exclusively on one person, being Burnham, you relied on the entire ensemble.
Yeah. Star Trek, I think traditionally has always worked better when it was an ensemble story. I mean, arguably, I think, you know, one of the nice things, this is something, again, I've talked about a lot with Leonard Nimoy, that he always felt like each character needed to contribute something to the episode. And like when he did Star Trek 3 and he made sure that everybody knew that they had something to do with stealing the Enterprise to go back to the Genesis planet. Okay, so that was important. This one, there did not feel like any wasted characters. Everybody had something to do. Everybody was doing stuff, and it was driving the story. And I think that was really well done. And I think, yeah, it works better when it's not the all Michael and or book show. It's, I think when everybody's in there doing something, everybody's playing in the sandbox, it works better. So I hope we get to see more of that before the end here. And, I hope it's a philosophy that will carry over into the future Star Trek shows.
I completely agree. Let's move on to the bad. Josh, do you want to start us off with what you did not like about the episode?
Well, there was one thing, just kind of a minor thing I didn't like. I would have preferred that maybe you could have dropped the whole line about maybe Maul could have been pregnant with Locke's baby, but that's kind of abstract. And as far as like Reno being like a former book smuggler, that kind of reminded me a little bit about the engineer on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. She had a similar line, in the 21st century that she was doing before she became an engineer. But I mean, sometimes you just reuse ideas. That's not really a big deal. Again, I'm still not happy with the Breen helmetless look. But, that's neither here nor there. There's nothing any of us can do about that. I didn't really have a lot of dislikes for this episode. I thought overall it was pretty solid, with the use of the characters and everything. And, it was nice to see Commander Narn back, etc. So, Chris, did you have any big dislikes with the episode?
Well, yes, I actually do have a few, which might seem weird because I love the episode. I really did.
Okay.
Probably the second best episode after the episode with the time bugs and the jumps. But yeah, so Josh, let me ask you a question. What is the most vulnerable point of a Federation starship?
The doors to the bridge.
The doors to the bridge, right? So apparently that design flaw has translated the Federation headquarters, because what is the most vulnerable part of the Federation? It's the headquarters. I mean, come on, where were the defenses for HQ? Where are the force fields? Where are, the perimeter platforms with, photon torpedo launchers? I mean, they had none of this. Vance was scared out of his wits. This ship just shows up at your doorstep, and you have no capability of defending HQ. Your best thing is I called in some other ships. I mean, where are your cannons? Where are your defenses for HQ? So clearly this design flaw has just, moved upwards, and from the doors to the bridge to the Federation headquarters in its entirety. I mean, come on, you have to have a better way to defend HQ. Not this, definitely not this. And then along those lines, they made a pretty big deal about how, dilithium, it's very scarce, it's limited all of our capabilities, not just the Federation, but everyone else's ability to get around and whatnot. We need couriers to deliver key information and products and whatnot. where are they getting the dilithium to fuel this gigantic ship? Because that's a really big ship that has really big engines. So where is the lithium coming from? Especially if the Federation seems to be the one who controls the last massive known resource for the lithium, which is that planet. So I don't think they're like in trade with the Breen right now to give them the lithium. So where are the Breen getting that massive amount of the lithium needed to power that ship? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, that
you know,
you know.
unless they have some other way. But that can't work either because in part of the backstory of Locke and Maul, like sees a courier delivering some dilithium, and they're asking, well, wait a minute, this dilithium seems kind of like on the iffy side, doesn't seem pure enough. So, um, if I was the Primar, I would have like looked at the offer of like what was it, 45,000 tons of um, dilithium, and I would have said yes because I need to power my ships to defeat the other guys like a Primac Tahal, who they like very gamely played him with, saying, "No, we're talking to Primac Tahal, and she's very interested in having this guy." Um, no, let's be practical here. What could you lift the Aragog for? Well, weapons to defeat my enemies. I mean, and one weapon would be the fuel for my ship. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not buying that all of a sudden they have the fuel from out of nowhere to power that large of a ship. And then the other thing I have is we agree this is a red directive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this
Yeah.
is like okay, you like emphasize like carrying this mission through. Only three guards on Lock and Mall, one outside and two inside. So really only two guards.
Mm-hmm.
You surround them with six. Okay, you just completely surround them. You give them no chance whatsoever to escape. Like none of this. Oh, let's just talk really quietly. Like no, isn't Zora listening? I mean, have Zora listen in. Like Zora's been able to tell them, hey, they're planning this. Like
Mm-hmm.
watch out. Like no, come on. And then why wouldn't Dr. Culber, as soon as they break out, instead of trying to fight it out with her, just say, like, computer, activate force field around the door, and that's it. Like, there's no need for like you to fight it out. Like, okay, yeah, you take out these two guys, that's fine, but force field on the door, what are you gonna do? I mean, it just like I didn't quite believe that the security around them would be so careless. And then I'm going to minorly nitpick here, and Commander Narn's eyes should have been blue because it was established that when she's outside of the environment of her home planet, her eyes turn a brilliant blue. Um, Now, of course, they could have like done something to prevent her eyes from turning blue when she's outside that atmosphere, but I think the eyes should have been blue. But security, security, and more security. That was my issue with the bat in this episode.
Yeah, I think security was notably very lapsed, but I guess it has to look lapsed in order to draw the episode out more. Um, it is quite silly, and yeah, I wanted to go back to that what you mentioned about the Breen having that big giant ship. I mean, where are they getting the dilithium to run it? Uh, I'm kind of wondering if they decided to go with the idea of bigger ships, but less of them for some reason, which doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. That you'd probably want to have more ships to be more easily to deploy than just having a couple of big ones. So
Yeah.
and that thing looked about as big as looked a little bit bigger than a Borg cube.
I mean, it did. And then when they call back, okay, Rain Vance is like, okay, we got our four ships here. I'm like, have you seen the size of that thing compared to your four ships? You should have
Hmm.
called back a lot more ships.
Yeah, I mean, as many ships. I mean, granted, I think in that case, though, those four ships were the closest ones to Federation headquarters at that point. So it could be that other ones are further out in the galaxy, doing exploration and probably also peacekeeping initiatives. Uh, but yeah, I mean, why not call in the Vulcan fleet? Why not? We saw them at the end of season 3. Why not have some? I'm not Vulcan. Um, Navarre fleet. I still can't get used to that.
I'm just saying, I guess security enhancements for Federation headquarters were subject to budget cuts. It's a design flaw. They should have stopped the design flaw 800 years ago with the doors to the bridge, and that just kind of percolated upwards all throughout until like no one thought about like how are we going to defend HQ? Like no, no.
Yeah, well, and the worst part about it is the Federation doesn't run on currency, so they have no excuse for this.
That's right. That's right.
You
There's no
know,
excuse.
yeah,
Yeah, we've never defended our bridge, so why would we defend our HQ? Like, no, like, this is what happens when you just repeat things over and over without thinking about, like, why do we do these things?
right, yeah.
All right, we got the Gorn. And Joss, I got a lot of stuff about the Gorn. And it's something that we actually started about talking about last week. And so let me follow through with this. And what happened to the civilizations that we knew about 800 years ago? So this
Mhm.
is where I think discovery is sort of falling short and helping us discover, pun intended, what happened to the civilizations. Like,
Right.
let's take note of what we know. We know Earth became isolationist behind a gigantic planetary shield that Federation HQ could probably use. We know the Vulcans and the Romulans merged. We know that the Trill have giant dragon-like insectoids that can self-camouflage. Um, we know that the Breen over the last 800 years built big carrier ships, and that seems to be about it. We know that Kelleron became the junkyard of the Breen.
Hmm.
Um, we know that um, the Tribbles ate the Klingons, but
Allegedly.
allegedly. But what has happened to the other civilizations that we knew? Like I thought we were going to Betazoid, and instead we're going to the Badlands.
Hmm.
Like I thought for a second last week we would be going to Denubila, and we got something far less than that. So why the reluctance to show us how these civilizations have evolved? I mean, like, do Bajorans have pictures of Cisco above every dinner table? Did the Andorians decide to say, screw it with these cold climates, we're moving someplace warmer? Did the Nausicaans decide to become tailors? Did all the Cardassians become reality TV stars? I mean, like, why are we not getting to see, besides this handful of civilizations, like what happened to all the rest?
Yeah, I mean, we would. We, yeah, I mean, I've been kind of complaining about that too. I mean, okay, we know that at some point Cardassia and Bajor did become Federation members. Yeah, and of course, as the Federation president has pointed out, she's half Bajoran, half human, half Cardassian. So we know they still exist. But what shape they're in right now, we have no idea.
I mean,
Um,
it can't be. Is it budget costs? I mean, it can't be. I mean, the budget costs would be far less now to create different backgrounds. Now that thanks to the Mandalorian, we have gigantic screens that they can use to create
yeah.
these diverse environments. So, like, um, are they saving it somehow for Academy? I mean, why are we not finding out what happened to the other civilizations?
Right. Yeah. I mean, are we going to next, whenever I guess Academy, if things go the way I think it's supposed to go at 2025, 26, the first episodes will finally roll out. I mean, are we going to have, they've made some announcements about cast members and stuff like that, but nothing specific. So are we going to bet whole new aliens? I mean, I would like to see some of the older races that we've known in Star Trek history, take, I mean, sure, we can have some new races, but honestly, we want some more Klingons. We want Ferengi. We want Bajorans, Beta Zeds, Cardassians, Romulans, whomever. We want this. Um, so we need to know more about what happened to them in the centuries between the next generation era and the 32nd century.
At a macro level, as I'm talking about what happened to the civilizations, what happened to the crew? Like 2 episodes with Saru, and then Saru's gone. Like they could have had him in this episode because it's at Federation HQ, but he just happens to be someplace else. No Detmer, no Elasticon. Like who the heck is Lieutenant Gallo? Like why are we not seeing more of the characters on the bridge, and we're suddenly seeing less. I mean, yes, I get it that maybe Saru and Raynor's a swap, but what about our Helms people? Like, is it that they in the final episode or in the final season were trying to control costs, and so therefore somehow the less someone appears, the less they have to pay them? I mean, was it cost control? Is Paramount again being the great Ferengi?
Possibly. It could also be that, given the fact that some of these actors are kind of there part time, or it could be that wait, Ashiku, weren't they assigned to take the Enterprise, the ISS Enterprise, back to Federation headquarters? Maybe they're still doing that.
I mean, how long do they need to do that? I mean, you really need the helmsman of Discovery. Couldn't you send, like, another skeleton crew? I mean, it just seems that we are seeing less of some of the people that we're used to seeing, and I'm wondering if it was a cost cutting measure.
It could have been, yeah. I mean, there's more I
Um,
want to get into that before we
okay,
go, but
I have a question for you, Joss.
mm,
So
okay.
we find out that Reno has embellished and padded her resume, and we find out that she makes a mean 7 of limes. But she also mentioned that she had been working for sort of a shady antiquarian bookseller.
Mm,
Could it have been Pelia?
could have been, could be, yeah. I
Right?
mean, they're around about the same time, and I mean, just because Pelia, joined Starfleet, became their number one engineer, and was training all their other big engineers, doesn't mean that she still wasn't dabbling a little bit in antiquarians and other things.
Oh, book.
That she might have still been playing around with that sort of stuff, in case, like she said last season on Strange New Worlds, this, I have to pad thing, be prepared in case this, um, this post-capitalistic, non, utopia falls apart. I need revenue. So maybe, you
Yeah, I,
know,
I, I wouldn't be surprised if it was her. And then I guess my final thing is I did not know that Betazoids could imbue objects with not memories, but I guess it would be some side of psychic recording. But I think that's what we saw now with the library key.
it could be. I mean, I guess it depends on how powerful of a telepath the Betazoid was in this question. I mean, remember I can't think of his name right now, but the Betazoid that was in the episode Tin Man,
Yeah,
when they
that's
went to,
true.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, maybe, somebody on that level of ability could have maybe done it. I could see that being a thing. Um,
So, Joss, I know that you wanted to talk about something that is on a few people's lips, which is the bidding war for Paramount.
yes, and this is something I think that is of very big concern, and I don't want people to panic. But okay, maybe panic a little bit, but I don't know if there's anything we, the fans, can do right now about this. But apparently, as of this week, Sony has announced an interest in buying Paramount. They have paired with a venture capitalist who has said that they want to cut Paramount up into individual components and sell them to different bidders. And of course, that means that Paramount CBS would be separate entities again, as they were, when Sumner Redstone split CBS off from the old Viacom network and let it be its own thing, uh, during which CBS, of course, sued Paramount over the ownership of Star Trek because the then CEO, Les Moonves, was trying to found his own media empire. Now, does this mean that whomever buys CBS is going to come in and say, hey, wait a minute, we own Star Trek, give us Star Trek back? Or does Paramount take them back to court and say, no, we own it, we're the ones who put all this money into it, uh, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and I think that's very frustrating, because the last time this happened, the likenesses of the ships and the aliens were all changed around. People were not happy about this. It didn't feel like their Star Trek. Um, it's always a good idea to change things up with Star Trek anyway, but some things, kind of because of continuity, do need to remain the same. I think people have been pretty happy with the fact that on Strange New Worlds, the Klingons have gone back to looking the way they did in the movie and TNG era Star Trek. I do not think that the season one Discovery Klingons, they had their fans, but I think there were a lot of people who didn't care for them or their makeup design or anything. I certainly did not. And I thought that it was very distracting from the continuity of Star Trek that we knew, because this was supposed to be a prequel. My ideal scenario is one in which a third party steps in and announces that they would just like to buy the complete Star Trek license, the whole thing, movies, TV shows, likenesses, comic books, everything. And I'm, best case scenario, somebody like Disney, in which case Disney would then own at least 5 or 6 of the major science fiction franchises. They would then own Predator, Aliens. They would have the American distribution rights to Doctor Who. They obviously own Star Wars, and then they could own Star Trek. Which case, I will personally go to Disneyland and bend the knee to a statue of Mickey Mouse. But I can't predict what's going to happen. Somebody may buy the whole thing and leave Star Trek completely intact, and we can continue with the plans that we have been hearing about for the last couple of years of new Star Trek productions like Section 31, which I think the primary footage is now in the can. They're just editing it and putting the special effects together. Hopefully that will be out. Hopefully Academy will get done. Hopefully we will someday even get Star Trek Legacy, which I know is the one we've all been sort of hoping for after the events of Star Trek Picard. At the very least, hopefully we can still continue to stream these shows, to continue to enjoy them as in our own homes and as reruns. But this is something that's probably going to be on the horizon, and we need to be aware that certain changes that might get made to future Star Trek productions may have nothing to do with the writers or the actors or anything, and so it would be a completely decision by the people up in the front office. So I think anybody who's working on Star Trek should not get blamed for the shortcomings of anything in the future if you have these corporate mergers. And on a personal level, I'll just say I'm sick to death of capitalism at this point, and I'm looking forward to living in a post-capitalistic society like that of Star Trek. So, Chris, what are your thoughts?
Well, streaming was supposed to be the end of the cable company. Cable company is just evolving to become streaming. Corporate mergers, unfortunately, are going to happen because it's about making the most money for the corporate shareholders. And I mean, we also know that I'm going to go back to the streaming example, that Disney and Max, which used to be HBO, and 5 years from now it might be something else, are thinking of offering a combined streaming platform for a price, of course, to people like us. So would I like Paramount and the Star Trek franchise to fall into the hands of Sony? No. Anyone who questions this just has to look at the terrible job they did with the Spider-Man movies before Marvel's involvement, and the terrible job they've done with Spider-Man movies without Marvel's involvement. I mean, Madam Web. I don't need to say anything else. But until we have stronger regulations, there will continue to be these mergers until, like, one day, perhaps too soon for all of us, we will have the Google, Apple, Coke company. Is it that far fetched? Maybe not, because it's all about increasing the bottom line and cutting costs. And there used to be, okay, this is the field of soft drink beverages. This is the field of, let's say, computers. This is the field of press industry. And may see mergers within each industry, but you won't see them across. Now we see them across, like anything goes. So it's whoever has the most money at that point, and they want to try to gobble up the next person. So yeah, unfortunately, I think that we are going to be seeing more mergers and not less until the moment that we have stronger regulations in place. And you know, there is a lot of money that does not want stronger regulations in place to impede these things from happening. So yeah, will we get a lower product? I mean, it's possible, because it's all about lowering profits. I mean, lowering costs and increasing profits. They don't. Quality of production is not something that they care about. I mean, the world's best fans or world's greatest fans is tossed out way too much, and it's become completely devalued. It's all about making reducing costs and making the most money. And they see Star Trek as a name that they can make money off of. I mean, Paramount was known as the Great Ferengi by many, but there's even bigger. There are Primark Ferengis out there now, and it's something that unfortunately is gonna be with us.
Yeah, and I mean, as we've seen with David Zaslav over at what he's done to Time Warner, it's getting worse, and they don't even care about putting out a quality product. He's just gouging it for everything it's worth, and it's no longer about us, the audiences who have been paying the money. It's about the stockbrokers. I mean, stockbroker says, "Hey, thank you for making me $1 million this year. Now go make me 2 million next year."
Well,
Um,
and
our
looking at Zaslav specifically, I mean, I'm a big NBA fan, and I love Inside the NBA. I think it's a fantastic show. But 2 years ago, Zaslav was like, "Yeah, we don't really need the NBA," and I think Commissioner David Stern took issue with that. I'm like, ah ha ha. And so renewal of the licenses for distribution of NBA games are coming up, and NBC has made a big bid for it, and TNT might be out, and we as viewers will lose Inside the NBA. Which, for anyone out there who watches it, I mean, it's an awesome show, and I love the repertoire between Kenny the Jet Smith, Charles Barkley, Shaq, Ernie Johnson, and yeah, that very possibly will be gone. And yeah, you could say that's going to, like, transfer to another station, but like Ernie Johnson's sort of a TNT lifer, and he's 68. I don't think he's going to go anywhere else. But yeah, there are things that are beloved to fans that in these corporate mergers get cast aside because they don't care about it, and they only see it as like, oh, Shaq has been there since 2011. Charles Barkley just signed like a big contract. Ernie Johnson's been a lifer. They cost us too much. This show costs us too much.
Yeah, our producer just chimed in on the host chat that with fewer companies there will be less incentive to compete to be better than other companies, and that's a good point because you know, you and I are huge Marvel fans. If there's no DC Cinematic Universe or DC Comics, I mean, will Marvel feel the incentive to do better? I mean, over the years, we could question the quality of a lot of comic book stories, because they wanted to do a big crossover instead of actually telling good stories like they did back in the 70s and 80s. And yeah, they, I mean, Marvel might just feel less incentivized to make a quality product that attracts fans, just that they're making a product, and that they'll get some money from some people and not everybody. But
I mean, look, the emphasis, as our producer said, the emphasis is on like cutting costs. But when you cut costs and you have mergers, that's less competition. So you feel less incentive, like, oh, I've got to up my game to be better than these five other places, when there's only like two other places you have to worry about. Um, and it's
right.
like the same thing you see with what's happening with cons right now. Like the con experience when you're at a larger con is being devalued for the people who go because the large entities that put it together don't give a crap about the experience that you're having. They don't carry you in line for like 9 hours to see someone like what happened at Awesome Con. And you have the flip side of that is you have still the mom and pop run locally comic book conventions, like let's say a Shore Leave, let's say a Fairfax Comic Con, where you have to see these people day in and day out, so you know you have to put in a good product. But when you're a large corporate entity that's never going to see the consumer, like you don't care.
Right, exactly. And right now, yeah, because you know, I mean, I think GalaxyCon did a nice job, but I think you've had, like you said, AwesomeCon, which is this big, like a circus, and it just
Yeah,
moves from town to town.
yeah,
GalaxyCon
yeah.
does too, but AwesomeCon, I don't know how they work in other cities, but our experiences with them have always been like big name guests canceling a few days before the show for some reason, 9 hour long autograph lines. Um, and also, one of the things that I hate about both AwesomeCon and GalaxyCon is only having one time to see certain people on stage. Um, so like, I mean, one of the nice things I've always liked about Short Leave and Farpoint is, okay, if you didn't get to see this person on Saturday afternoon, good news, they're going to be on Sunday afternoon. And some of that could just be because they booked so many guests to be profitable. Um,
I
they
mean,
just
look
can't do it.
At GalaxyCon Richmond, the guy who actually owns and runs the company is there at the. He's there. There's a guy. There's one guy, and like he gives out his own prize for the cosplay contest at the end. But there's that one guy there who's actually taking note of everything that's going on. Like there's none of that one guy at AwesomeCon. It's
No,
a corporate entity, so yeah,
yeah. Yeah,
large corporate entities, Nike, Google, Apple, not a good thing.
yeah, and if anybody is works for the Federal Trade Commission or something like that, it's time to start enforcing some of those anti-monopoly laws that we have let get incentivized, get watered down, or just not enforced in the last 34 years. Okay, enough of this listening to the ghost of Michael Crichton in the book Rising Sun and all that crap. It's time to break these corporations up. Okay, and it's time to stop gouging our licenses, our media properties. I mean, I'm not complaining about the quality of either Marvel or Star Wars at Disney. I think they've been fine. I think they've been consistent. I don't know what the fanboys complain about. They just want to complain about something. But enough of this crap where, okay, we go through this, and our beloved products like Star Trek and Star Wars and others are just, getting tossed around. They mean something to us. Okay, they're important, and these monopolies are hurting us. I mean, some people could say, well, it's not like a monopoly, like, I mean, there's just too many. There's airline monopolies, there's electric company monopolies, there's hospital monopolies, and it needs to stop.
Now, I want to echo my producer on something I mentioned earlier about Inside the NBA. Chuck and Shaq are awesome. Like,
Yeah,
I don't want to watch another NBA show that doesn't have the both of them. And I mean, again, Shaq and Chuck, Kenny, and Ernie Johnson, they're the best show, hands down. I do not want to watch another show about the NBA without them. It's so, Josh, it's getting time for us to wrap up. And in addition to remembering all the moms out there, do we have anything else that we want to share that people might want to know about the upcoming week?
well, at the end of this week's episode, of course, the crew found the next clue is at the um, uh, I'm sorry, blanking on the name,
The library
the
in the
library,
Badlands.
and it's in the Badlands. So I guess we're heading there. This might be an exciting time to put a interesting character in charge of the library. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about Brett Spiner appearing on Discovery this season. But wouldn't it be interesting if we found out Data was in charge the of the library? I mean, you know, and we're gonna wonder what this, traveling libraries about, but I'm pretty excited about it. So I'm hoping it'll be. I think this episode will actually be directed by Jonathan Frakes, if I'm not wrong.
So my forecast for the immediate future is that if it's an automated library that jumps around space, I think some of the things that you're accustomed to on a ship is probably not going to be present. I mean, I think that you may find places that don't have oxygen,
Hmm.
some rooms that may not have gravity, because there's some niceties that you need when you have human living beings within the library. But I think it's just going to be one empty vault, like a seed vault. This is just a vault for books. And so there'll be places like, yeah, oops, no oxygen, oops, no power, oops, no gravity, which is something that I would sort of assume with a gigantic storage box.
Yes. Well, I'm hoping that maybe one of my books will be in the library. That would be nice.
That would be very nice. So, as we get ready to wrap up, for any of you who are D&D fans, and here in the Washington D.C., the Library of Congress is having on Tuesday, I believe, a D&D night, which is going to feature speakers, a quest within the library, and a lot of very cool things. New tickets have just been released, and so go to Library of Congress website and see if you can perhaps, if you're a D&D fan, score yourselves one. The tickets are free. That's going to be an interesting night at the Library of Congress if you're in the DC area. And with that, I will wish you. Oh, I do have one final reminder. Last episode of X Men '97 is this week, people. If you haven't been watching X Men '97, go watch it now because this is the finale, and um, we had our fatal attractions moment. Those of you who are X Men fans, you know what I'm talking about, and it's like, oh yeah,
Yes, that
it
was
happened.
a terrific episode. I would love to talk to you more about it later. Also, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes was extraordinary.
Oh, cool. You know, I
Yes.
was wondering about that. Like, do we really need a fourth Kingdom Planet of the Apes style movie?
In this case, I think we do.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Perfect. Fair enough. All right, everyone. Happy Mother's Day. Peace and long life.
Live long and prosper, everybody. Bye bye.